What's going on, guys? I'm David, and I'm here today because I wanted to yap a little bit about a project that I've been working on. It's an observability tool that I built for myself, and I kind of want to talk about two things. One, why would I build an observability tool when I could just use an open source solution, or I could pay for a solution? The pay reason's pretty obvious. I don't want to pay for anything. But the second point I want to make is that when you have more things you're building, they compound and you end up building more and you get better. That's the whole point, right? That's what we're all doing here. So I wanted to just show off what I've been working on here with Sentinel is what I've called it. It's an amazing name. So let me just talk about it really quick. So what is it? It's an observability dashboard. It's something that I have a roadmap for of things that I want to add. But what it's doing right now is I have this overview page, which really this was my MVP. I built this, made some small improvements because just a little bit about this. I am not a UI designer. I don't do UI. I just don't. That is something I will leave up to the vibe coding. But I did decide on what I wanted to see here, and I let Cursor do the rest. I'm sorry, sue me. Actually, please don't. I can't afford it. You won't get anything from it anyway. But what I have here is my overview. So I've got the total number of targets because I'm targeting multiple websites that I've built and run. How many of those are passing the health checks? So this is if it has a latency of less than 500 milliseconds. Active incidents, it's 0 right now. Incidents are a metric that I kind of came up with. Right now, what determines an incident is if a website goes down. So if there's like a 404 or a 500 error, it'll trigger an incident. Or if the website is consistently slow or consistently down. But that's incidents, just an overview. And then the average latency. And then I have my latency chart, my uptime chart. I'm still deciding on how useful these are, and there are some ways I want to make them more useful, which I'll get into. And then I break down some of the most recent pings. You can see my actual VPS, which is just the entry point to my virtual private server. Not doing too hot. Down here, I've got my activity. I plan on adding some more telemetry to the application as well. Incidents, if I had any, they'd pop up here. So that's what I've got so far. And again, this idea spurred from two things that actually happened. One is a funny story. I was sitting down, I think it was at church, and I was talking to some guys, and I just mentioned like, yeah, I build websites, and it's like, oh, you have a website? And I was like, actually, I have like 9. I should see how they're doing. So then when I went to visit my websites, I realized one of them was actually down. Now, it's not a Cloudflare or Vercel or anything website. They have good uptime. It was one of my virtual private server applications, specifically this PokeVote app that I built on my VPS. It went down, and I actually don't know why, and I thought that wasn't good. All I need to do was restart the Apache server to get it up and running again. Shout out if you're an Apache guy or gal. But that just gave me the idea. Yeah, I finally have enough infrastructure where seeing what it's doing is important. So why would somebody spend months building something like this when they could pay for an existing solution? I mean, the easy answer would be for the love of the game, right? I want more ideas and things to code. But it also brings up real engineering problems. Because again, one of the things that personally inspired me to code and gets me excited to build things is I want to work on real software. You know, it's one thing, especially now with AI, to build a website. It used to be a bit of a pain. You'd have to like actually code the UI, maybe like tweak a template and then like host it somewhere. Like it used to take some work. Now you could legitimately vibe code a website in 5 seconds. I've always wanted to go a bit deeper, and as I've said, I'm not a front-end kind of guy. I don't care for UI design. Sorry. It's just not me. I like infrastructure, and I've wanted a data-heavy project for a while. And this introduced the perfect opportunity for that, because what Sentinel is doing is it's pinging websites every 30 seconds. And if you're saving all of those pings, that eventually becomes a nightmare. So I want to talk about the real engineering problems this brings up, and then how that ties into essentially every problem I solve then gives me more problems to solve. And next thing you know, you have a really interesting piece of software. So far, it's looking good. I haven't broken it yet. But just because you have good engineering problems doesn't necessarily mean you've got good software. Bit of a tangent, just a thought. But problem one, collecting the metrics. So it's a pretty simple answer for the initial MVP. I'll just store them in a Postgres database, right? Run some PSQL, it'll be fine. But of course, when you're planning this out, like how long should I store those checks? What information should we collect? What happens if a check fails? How do I measure, latency reliably? So the challenge isn't collecting the data. It's really easy. You ping it and you run a SQL query, and you're doing that 9 times every 30 seconds. Maybe a bit excessive. The second problem, as I've already mentioned, is data retention. How long am I going to store each ping? So right now, it's still just storing pings every 30 seconds. It's not optimal. And I'm creating a plan to fix this if I could work a keyboard. And hopefully, oh my goodness, hopefully this is switching over tabs here. Yeah, we're looking good. So here's one of the things I've put together, and this is also on the GitHub, so you can check this out too if you're a curious cat. But this is my plan for creating rollup tables for my database. So again, I've understood the concept of creating rollup tables to aggregate data, but sometimes when you don't personally feel a problem, you don't entirely understand it. So right now, the current schema is this, very simple. I got health checks the health check table, which is recording the pings every 30 seconds based on the monitored targets. And then the monitored targets have incidents when they occur. And I'm working on my telemetry, say that 3 times fast, telemetry metrics. So I want to see how my VPS is doing. Yes, it's a hosting or VPS. And sure, I could just I could just go to the website. But where's the fun in that? That's no fun. But what I want to do is scroll down here to the planned rollup structure. So I was just thinking, and this is why you take on a project like this. It's why you build something that already exists, because, it means the script is out there and you don't have to start completely from scratch, but you also at least start to think, how do the big dogs do it? How do successful observability tools handle this massive amount of data? Because at the end of the day, you do want to ping the websites every 30 seconds so that you're getting the active live data, but you can't store that forever. And 30-second observability stops being helpful very quickly. Maybe if you're running some very sensitive software and you have incidents and you want to deep dive into them, you'll want the 30-second pings. But after a week, and that's kind of how I'm going to set this up, is after a week, the health check data will start to get purged. So the way I plan this is I have a health check table, same thing that I currently have. Every 30 seconds gets the pings. But I'll probably purge the data after 7 days, maybe 14. But I want to run this lean. And again, I'm not running anything crazy, so I don't need to keep this data for too long. Why would I be looking at the 30-second incremental data after 7 days? It stops being useful, but you aggregate that data. So every 5 minutes, we're going to aggregate the data to the 5-minute summary. So this way, that table that I had, that I think leaves a little bit to be desired. Once again, if I could work a keyboard, there we go. We're going somewhere. Notice it's just the latency over the last hour. I haven't set this up to, to show different amounts of data, different lengths of data. Like, right now it's just static to every 60 minutes. If I want to look at what happened yesterday, I don't have a button for that. The reason I haven't implemented it is because, do I want it to query a day's worth of 30-second pings? I think PSQL could handle this for me. But that's just one of my questions where I'm like, is that the most optimal way to do it? So that's what led to me thinking this. So for example, with my health check aggregation of every 5 minutes, if I wanted to check maybe like an hourly range, it would query from that table as opposed to returning every 30 seconds. It'll return the 5-minute summary increments. And then when I start wanting to look out at days plus, maybe I want to look at today's overall data, it'll summarize it by hour. And then the hourly table aggregates the data from the 5 minutes over the last hour. So it summarizes that. So then I can pull up, let's say, maybe a week's worth of data. I think a week's worth of data would probably get that daily aggregate. See, these are some of the things I still got to think through. But again, you get the point. The goal here is to summarize the data so that you can see it over time, and we're retaining the data for as long as possible while keeping it useful without blowing up the server, blowing up the database storage. That's the goal. That's what I'm trying to do. And that's where you aggregate your data. So again, let me know in the comments if you think there's a better way to do this or if you disagree. Another approach that you could, of course, take with something like this would be to actually stream the data. So right now I'm recording every 30 seconds in a SQL database, as opposed to maybe like a streaming approach where maybe every health check is an event and you summarize the events. You might place them into like a Redis cache or something like that. Maybe hold it for a few minutes, summarize the data every few minutes. So then instead of, 30-second pings that you then have to go back and purge and manage and aggregate, you just start with the aggregations and then go from there. I don't know, just a thought. I'm not a senior data engineer, but the planned retention cycle is we can upsert the data every 5 minutes from the health check, upsert them hourly buckets every 5 minutes, upsert buckets, hourly buckets, daily buckets from hourly aggregates, and so on. And then again, I have a plan for pruning the health checks moving forward. So again, this will be on the GitHub. If you're a curious cat, you want to take a look at some of the diagrams I've put together, or if you're just interested in a project like this, because I think this is just a really, really cool idea. And it's something like, again, that I personally have been interested in for a while, because I've wanted something where I can manage data and figure out how do you handle massive amounts of data. I'm actually handling a decent amount of data. Each website pings every 30 seconds. So each of my targets, that's about, 27,000 rows I'm saving every day. 9 targets, that's like 250,000 rows a day. Project's been running, 2-3 weeks, maybe a month now. So it's a data heavy project, and it's something that simulates real information. So I really thought trying to solve the rollups strategy has been fun. Now, one of the things I'd say is you could probably use AI to just vibe code this thing out, because I've got the plan, I've got the details. You can just have AI do it. Again, I'll work with AI to write the code, but I do want to see and feel, how do you solve this? How do you write the queries? What does all that look like? So I want to make sure I implement that correctly. So I'm not going to just vibe code all of that. And then problem number 3 that I had written down here is building useful dashboards. As I've already said, right now things are static. For me, this is fine, because if something's down, it'll tell me. I know this service is degraded. I'll get around to fixing it one of these days. But I like a snapshot because, sometimes it's interesting to look at some of my Cloudflare hosted websites. Let's look at this one. Today, this one looks like it was performing pretty well. There's no degraded services, at least not over the past hour. You can see there was a bit of a spike here. And it's just, to me, it's also just interesting seeing like the Cloudflare performance on some of my websites. But some of these, especially the ones with the djm-apps.com, that's my VPS, and everything on the VPS is on a subdomain. So it's interesting to see how like websites on my VPS perform versus Cloudflare. Not to say I've got any better ideas than those guys. But building a useful dashboard. Again, this is nice, but if I want to go deeper, I want this latency chart to stretch over time. So I want to summarize the data a little bit better. I haven't thought through what I want to do with the uptime. This probably doesn't need to be such a big graph. I could summarize this differently as well. My services, activities, I want to get the telemetry monitoring going so I can see how my server's doing all in one place. And again, that's the other thing. Like, sure, I could go to Hostinger. Sure, I can look at the websites on Cloudflare, but I want them all in one place. So building useful dashboards, this is something I'm still thinking through a little bit. But I want to make sure I can capture incidents, track spikes, and just see how things are performing over time. So, all of that being said, I have yapped for a little bit longer than I wanted to. But, what I got from this is I wanted a monitoring platform, and it has led to me building more things than I ever would have thought. And that's how you build the expertise, because I'm sure at some point I'll have to build another SQL rollup table plan where we aggregate the data and do all of that good stuff. And then again, I started by building just websites, and I would build stuff, you can see them here. I've got, Davy Maps, just a fun little, it was a Rust project with React front end, but it's a procedural terrain generation app. I was just curious. I wanted to play with Rust, see what it could do. I think it performs relatively well. If you want to check it out, davymaps.djmapps.com. It's right here. Check it out. But because I built all these websites, it led to me thinking, I need a platform. So I'm building my own infrastructure to monitor my websites. And then that is introducing more opportunities to build and opportunities to learn. So again, the goal is to get off the tutorials, go out there and build stuff. Because again, the more you build, the more you'll see, what are real problems out there in the wild that need to be solved. So let me know your thoughts. Let me know if this was interesting. Let me know if you've got anything nice or mean to say about Sentinel and what I should be doing here. And let me know if this helped you at all, gave you some perspective on, hey, what should I get out and build, what to do. I would love to hear about everybody's projects and what's going on. But yeah, my goal here is to just kind of encourage everybody to just get out there and build stuff, because once you start, it can be something stupid. But my goal and challenge to everybody would be build something, host it, and share it. Be proud of what you built, even if it is horrifying. Because the more you do that, the more this compounds, and the more, next thing you know, you got a portfolio. And then the next thing you know, you've got some really cool apps and things to talk about here. Like, this is an app I get excited about talking about, and I think it's more interesting than a to-do list. So let me know your thoughts. That's all for me today. But I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great day.